back, guys, here with John Bird's 365. We are joined by Jon Machota, who covers the Cowboys on a day-in, day-out basis for The Athletic. We like to go behind enemy lines, know who the Eagles are going to be facing as the season plays itself out. John, Jody McDonald and John McMullen here. Thanks for getting up and doing this with us.
No problem, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, John, thrilled to have you. Obviously, the Dallas Cowboys, always a high-profile team. Nobody needs to start there, America's team. And I think everyone looks at Dak Prescott coming back and being healthy and looks at all the talent on the offensive side of the ball. The offensive line as well, coming back healthy. Zach Martin, Tyron Smith. When you look at this team, it starts with defense, doesn't it? It starts with Dan Quinn. It starts with moving on from Mike Nolan. Are they good enough on that side of the ball?
Yeah, it's tough to even say right now. I never thought that they would be quite as bad as they were last year. And I understand that they were bringing in a new coaching staff, and those were certainly not ideal times during the pandemic, doing most of your stuff. Most of the implementation of your new stuff over basically like calls like this and not being able to be in person. And you've heard a lot of players talk this mini camp and OTAs about how different it's been. And so there is a lot of excitement behind Dan Quinn, not just from the fan base, but from the players too. You hear it quite a bit that they seem really excited about what he's trying to do. So yeah, that's the hope for them, but that's what it comes down to for the Cowboys is how good can this defense be? It's certainly not, I don't care how great Dan Quinn is. It's not going to be some top 10 defense, but can they get to at least respectability, middle of the pack, not be an embarrassment in some games like they were last year? I mean, that was arguably the worst defense in Cowboys franchise history if you break down some of the numbers on it. So can they be at least middle of the pack to team up with what should be a loaded offense? If they can, then they should absolutely have every opportunity to win the division. If it's the same defense or something similar to last year, then I can see them being a huge disappointment again.
Let's stay on the defensive side of the ball and go back to draft night. The Cowboys basically in the same position the Eagles were in. We thought the Eagles were looking at drafting a cornerback when their pick came up. The Cowboys were looking at drafting a cornerback when their pick came up. And damn if the two top cornerbacks didn't come off the board before either one of them could pick. So the two teams ended up engineering a deal with the Eagles trading up and the Cowboys trading back. Cowboys never would have traded back if one of those two cornerbacks was still on the board. Am I correct?
Oh, yeah, absolutely no chance. They like both of those guys. I believe if both of them were there, they would have went with J.C. Horn. And I think J.C. Horn thought he was going to be going to the Cowboys, just looking at a lot of the pre-draft stuff, that a lot of ESPN things that they had behind the scene cameras and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden they were forced to scramble. And hey, listen, the Cowboys loved Micah Parsons. They say that he was the top defensive player on their board. But at the end of the day, actions speak louder than words. And if that is absolutely your guy, you're not even trading out of 10. You're absolutely taking right there. They never would have traded. If both those corners are sitting there at 10, they're not like, hey, let's go ahead and trade within the division. Let's see if we can maybe still get an extra pick, and then we'll still get one of these. No, you absolutely take your guy. And so Micah Parsons has been impressive so far. But yeah, there's no question. If one of those corners is there, that's the pick for the Cowboys at 10.
How did the division aspect play into that trade, John? Because obviously, if you look at it long term, if Devontae Smith turns into Devontae Smith at Alabama, look, the Cowboys don't need a receiver. I mean, they have CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup. They don't want or have a need for Devontae Smith, but still, when you trade with somebody in your division, how does that impact, or how did Stephen Jones and Jerry Jones kind of look at that?
All right, so Stephen Jones says that when they were on the phone with the Eagles, that they told him that they were taking an offensive player, and so that's why they felt good with it. But again, I mean, these are handshake deals, not even. They're agreements over the phone. Like, forget the Eagles in this situation. Forget them taking a pick there. What if the Eagles would have traded, let's say they trade back with a Cowboy, or they trade up to 10, and then all of a sudden someone comes in and throws a boatload at them because they want Micah Parsons, and they know the Cowboys. Then all of a sudden, then the Cowboys lose out on Parsons too. Like, there's no guarantee that the Eagles are going to do exactly what you want. I mean, regardless of them being probably your biggest rival right now, just the fact that it's the NFL, like, there's no guarantees to any of this stuff. So they still ran a risk, even though it was a small one, that even they would have lost out on Parsons there as well. And then that would have been really interesting if that would have happened. But no, Stephen Jones says that they told him they were going to take an offensive player. And the Cowboys felt like we're dealing with Devontae Smith either way. It was either he goes to the Giants or he's going to go to the Eagles. Like that's just how it was going to be. And either way, it was going to go to a division team.
Right. And if you trade down, then at least you get that added pick. What the Eagles were going to do if you just stayed at home, took your kid, and let the chips fall where they may with the wide receiver there after you don't get that bonus pick. So I thought the Cowboys actually played their cards pretty wisely at that point. Again, there's some parallels between the Cowboys and Eagles. The Eagles, maybe even more so now, have cornerback issues. Neither one of the teams have truly answered their cornerback issues. How much does the defensive line pressure relieve the fact that they don't have quite enough talent on the back end? Did the Cowboys, why should Cowboy fans believe under Coach Quinn now the Cowboys are going to be able to generate a better pass rush, or shouldn't they?
I would say the biggest reason for hope is that it seems like they're going to keep building on being a little bit more multiple in their pass rush. And when I say that, I mean, there's almost a decade here of a Rod Marinelli, Monte Kiffin type scheme where most of your pass rush was just coming from your front four. And that's fine if you have a lot of talent in just your front four. But the defensive tackle position has been far from a strength for the Cowboys for a long time. And so really your pass rush is just coming down to DeMarcus Lawrence and then hoping that you'll get something else from what has been just every offseason. Well, we're going to go out and go get guys like Aldon Smith and going out and getting a Robert Quinn for a year. And there's been no real continuity there. So now you take Micah Parsons. And if Micah Parsons is drafted under Rod Marinelli, we're not sitting here thinking, oh, well, Micah Parsons might get 6, 7, 8 sacks because that's just not how they use their linebackers. Under Dan Quinn, and I'm going off of, too, just what we've seen from OTAs, rookie minicamp, and minicamp. Dan Quinn certainly seems like he's going to bring Micah Parsons a lot more. There were plenty of times we've seen him line up as like a defensive end, which is kind of in his defensive scheme. It's called like a Leo position where he'll come up, creep up to the line of scrimmage. He might end up dropping back, or he might come in and rush the passer. And so there's just going to be a lot of different moving pieces there that you really haven't seen from the Cowboys in the past. And I mean, Mike Nolan tried to implement that, but the problem was that the players didn't really buy in and they didn't really have the offseason to implement it the right way. And so they were kind of scrambling from the beginning of the season. So I think, DeMarcus Lawrence is still a very good edge rusher. I think Micah Parsons will be up there. Randy Gregory is 28 years old. He's going to be your right defensive end. He's going to get a lot of opportunities there. They're hoping that he can take that next step, but yeah, it's not some loaded defensive line where they can just get their pressure with their four guys. There's going to have to be a lot more blitzing, and they're going to have to be a little bit more exotic than they've been in previous seasons.
Yeah, John, you mentioned kind of that Monte Kiffin and Rod Marinelli. Really goes back to Tony Dungy. A lot of cover two, a lot of just base defense. So where do the linebackers fit into this? Micah Parsons is going to play as a high-profile first-round pick. You also have Jalen Smith. Injury concerns, but boy, when Leighton Banderas was healthy, he looked like he was going to be a star player. Are they going to play a lot of three linebackers? Is it just going to be two linebackers, and you kind of let the chips fall where they may with Jalen Smith and Leighton Banderas?
Well, I think it's going to be two of your traditional type, Mike, weak side type linebackers. I think you'll see a lot of that. But then I also think that they'll work in Micah Parsons as somewhat more of an edge rusher, and then that'll actually bring in another linebacker because of that. Because I don't see Micah Parsons coming off the field. I think they're going to use him in a variety of ways. I think he's the best chess piece they have. Now, with that being said, and I wrote about this week, a lot of this same talk was being said last year at this time about Isaiah Simmons with Arizona. It was, this is going to be his chest piece. They can move around. And it took him a while to kind of, he was playing all linebacker positions, safety, nickel corner for Arizona. And it wasn't a huge success right away. And so you got to be careful about putting too much on a young guy's plate like that as well. And so, but the linebacker position, they certainly went out there. And that's the thing. Very interesting. Going back to my actions speak louder than words. Dan Quinn had a chance to watch all of that tape from last year. And it must have been very clear to him how underperforming those linebackers were, because his biggest move in free agency was going out and getting a guy he knows in Keanu Neal, who at the time we thought, they're adding a safety. Keanu Neal has not played any safety throughout minicamp and OTAs. It has been strictly as a linebacker. So they got him working out there. And then your biggest investment in the draft is Micah Parsons. And then their biggest steal, probably the best value pick for the Cowboys, was getting Jabril Cox in the 4th round. And so then you add him with Jalen Smith and Leighton Banderas. They have a good solid 5 linebackers if they're all healthy. But because of how poorly the linebacker position has been for the Cowboys the last 2 years, they needed to address it. We go back to 2018, man, it looked like, the ceiling was very high for Leighton Banderas and Jalen Smith coming off that year. And then these last 2 years, because of injuries, ineffective play, it's turned into one of their biggest weaknesses. Sean Lee retires. So there's a lot of moving pieces there. And frankly, I think they need that. Cowboys fans have talked about, they need to trade one of these guys. Now they have so many linebackers. Now, I don't think they're going to be doing that. They're happy to have a surplus at a position that's been such a weakness.
2 years running, as a matter of fact, I'd like the Cowboys' 5th round pick, Cox, this year. And last year, I had a chance to have Bradley and I on my CBS Sports radio show. So I knew I was getting him on. So I did a little homework on him, watched a little video. I said, damn, this kid can play. I had him on before the draft. I thought he was going to go back of the 2nd, probably in the 3rd round. He fell all the way to the 5th, and the Cowboys snapped him up. Hit or miss last year. I didn't watch every snap of every game, but the stats say he didn't play that much. He contributed some, but I don't know how much he was given a chance. We see progression from him, the Utah kid, Bradley and I, here in year number 2. What is his role on the Cowboys this upcoming season?
It's funny you say that, Jody, because that's exactly the way the fan base was after they drafted him. And then it was like you'd go into week 1, week 2, week 3, and he was not even active. And you're just kind of like, it's not like this team's loaded edge rusher. How's this guy not even active? And so, again, I guess I'll chalk it up a little bit to it was hard transition for these rookies going in under the conditions with a new coaching staff and the limitations of a COVID time. So we have seen him out there a little bit more, but if they absolutely thought that he was ready to take the next step, do they go out and sign Terrell Basham from the Jets, who, if I'm listing who I think are going to be their top edge rushers, I'm going Lawrence 1, Randy Gregory 2, and Basham 3, and then 4th is probably Micah Parsons in that mix. So, Bradley and I certainly should be in that mix, and we'll see as we get out to training camp. But as I sit here right now, if everybody's healthy, I think he's battling with Dorrance Armstrong as being kind of like the 4th edge rusher in that mix.
Okay.
John, I want to shift to the offensive side of the ball. I think we got to start with the head coach, Mike McCarthy. I think everybody remembers the last few years in Green Bay. They're now kind of realizing, look, Aaron Rodgers is kind of difficult to deal with. He had a lot of success in Green Bay before things went off the rails. How is he taken in Dallas? How is the fan base look at Mike McCarthy, especially coming off last season? Early in the season, they were looking like they were going to be spectacular offensively. And then obviously you lose your starting quarterback, and it got ugly. We saw the Ben DiNucci game up close. But, when Mike had his guys, they were performing at a high level. How's he kind of looked at?
Not very highly right now. I can tell you, one of the biggest things is you have this entire time off, between the Packers and getting the Cowboys job. And the biggest knock on him so far is just how unorganized things looked last year. And let's be honest, if you're an offensive, that's your background as a head coach. You're an offensive guy. Isn't your most important hire your defensive coordinator? And for that to already have failed through one season, that doesn't look great for you as a head coach, that you're already moving on from him. You're already moving on from Jim Tom Sula, like after only one season. And then just how sloppy things looked on the field. It was like one of those things that, nobody that watches the Cowboys was expecting Mike McCarthy to come in and kind of rebuild everything. It was to build on, like, Jason Garrett. The reason he was gone is because he couldn't win in the playoffs. It wasn't because he couldn't get there or he couldn't compete in the division. It was, hey, is this team going to finally get past the second round? Can they, hey, let's go get this guy who's had success in the postseason, who's gotten to the NFC Championship game multiple times, who's gotten to Super Bowl, has won a Super Bowl. And so when you see 6-10, and then you're already like, you got guys that look lost on the field. Let's be honest, on that offense, like, I don't know that you need an offensive guru to have some success coaching all these high round picks on your offensive line. The investment you've made at quarterback, running back, the trio of wide receivers you have. So, the defense looking as bad as it did was not a good look for Mike McCarthy. So certainly fans are expecting a lot more this season. Double-digit wins at the very least.
And John, the reason why we love having guys like you on, because you're there every single day. You see every single play. You've got that much more insight. Another guy I was just woefully wrong about last year, Bradley and I being one, thought he was going to step in, contribute year one, didn't happen. The other one, different type of player, but I thought, damn, that's a good addition, was Greg Zuerlein. Greg the Leg was going to go in there indoors. And I said, this guy's going to be booting 55-yard field goals on a weekly basis. And it just didn't happen. Why?
Yeah, it's been weird in Dallas for the last few years, ever since Dan Bailey was kind of on a run where he was one of the better kickers in the league. They just have struggled to get that same consistency at kicker. And it came in as a competition between Zuerlein and Brett Maher, and Zuerlein is John Fossil's guy, so he's going to get the job. I think that there's still a lot of confidence there with Fossil in Zuerlein. Obviously, their time working together with the Rams. I'm really not sure. I mean, the biggest thing with him is they just need that consistency that they really have not had, and so. My biggest takeaway is that if they were that concerned, I feel like they would have addressed it this offseason. And because they didn't, I think they're pretty content at the position. But yeah, it's nowhere near you don't feel as good as you did, let's say, when Dan Bailey was in his prime and at one point was the most accurate kicker in the NFL.
Probably took too long to get here, John, but Dak Prescott, obviously. I mean, this is a tough sport, man. I mean, if you look at Dak, for years, 16. He was one of the guys. He was durable. He was somebody you can count on. I remember him playing through the shoulder injury here where he probably shouldn't have been on the field. And then all of a sudden it happens. That's what the NFL is. If you play it long enough, injury rate is 100%. Where is he? Does he look like the same guy? Is he on track? Are we going to see the same guy who was on track to be potentially an MVP candidate?
So yeah, everything we've seen at OTAs and minicamp, you would know that he had suffered that injury, if you had not seen it. I mean, he does not look like anybody that's favoring his right ankle or whether he's dropping back, rolling out to his right or left, does not look like he's favoring it. His throwing motion, nothing looks like it's changed. I mean, he looks like the same guy. The thing is you guys know, like, these guys aren't being tackled at this time. And really, even in training camp, they're not going to be trying to tackle Dak Prescott to the ground. So you're not, he doesn't want to talk about this. We talked to him about it this week, and he was talking about how he wants to move from the injury. He doesn't want to keep talking about, well, it's like, well, you're going to have to take some hits. I mean, that's the thing. That's the next step now. Like, how are you going to, this is a mobile quarterback. He's obviously going to get tackled in games. And as you point out, that Eagles game, I mean, he obviously was injured there. He injured himself in the Rams game before that on a scramble. This play that happened that ended his season last year was on a scramble. That's a big part of his game. I mean, that's particularly in the red zone. And so he feels confident that he's all the way back. He really wasn't limited at all. They just didn't do the 11 on 11 with the defensive line because they didn't want any accidental guy rolling into his ankle or anything like that. But he's supposed to be a full go when training camp starts. So everything's on track there. And obviously he has a lot of weapons to work with, but it's going to be when the bullets are flying in an actual game. How much is he still looking to run? I don't think it's going to be anywhere near as much as it was in the past. And really with these offensive weapons, it shouldn't be, but he has to be a mobile guy. That's one of the great strengths he has in his game. And so I think even he won't admit this because he doesn't want us to keep asking about this, but there has to be that threshold of now I got to get hit. I got to get a hit and I got to get up and then get back to the huddle and then everything's fine. Just mentally, you would just think for anybody who had went through such a gruesome, to look down at your ankle, a guy who has not had many injuries, certainly not any severe ones, and your ankle is pointing the opposite direction. There has to be a part of you that's like, I have to see now if I can take this hit and everything's going to be fine. That has to be the next threshold. And we're not going to see that, and maybe not until week 1.
John, certainly it will be determined over time, and what will help determine how many hits he is going to take on that ankle is the offensive line. This is another area where you can compare the Cowboys and the Eagles. There's serious similarities here. When Eagles won the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, big part of it was their big five up front, continuity, no injuries, high-level play. That's how they won the Super Bowl. The Cowboys the year before had the best offensive line in football. 3 of those guys still there, but coming back off various injuries. Eagles are hoping the right-hand side of their line with Brooks and with Johnson can stay healthy, stay on the field, and that will improve their chances. How's the health on Smith, Martin, and Lyle Collins coming into the season?
So they've been very cautious with them throughout OTAs and minicamp. Lot of working off to the side. No setbacks with them. They're going to be ready to go. But you just get this feeling this training camp is going to be all about just keeping these guys healthy, getting to week 1, because that was such a setback for them. Not only to lose Dak, but to lose both of your offensive tackles. Mike McCarthy talks about it all the time, how there's just studies done that, I mean, regardless of having the top elite offensive linemen, just having those 5, like you said, throughout an entire season. A lot of teams at the end of the year that are having success are because they've had that same 5 together, the continuity and things like that. I mean, just looking at how poorly that machine was running for Kansas City in the Super Bowl when you lose those offensive linemen. I mean, I was under the impression Patrick Mahomes, it didn't matter what 5 guys those were in front of him, but it does matter. And so that is, it's funny because that is like the biggest telltale sign. Like if you could tell me, if you ask me, what is the one thing the Cowboys have to have this year, if you can get anything, I'd say number 1 is Dak Prescott healthy. And number 2 would have to be that offensive line, because it's not just with keeping Dak healthy. The running game has not been nowhere near the same since those times you were talking of, and so, yeah, you're going to have those guys there, for a full season. And if that happens, I mean, those are 3 Pro Bowl caliber offensive linemen that they were out for an extended period of time last year. That's going to be a huge reason for if this team has success or not, because you just don't plug in the next guy up. As much as they talk about that, and that's the mantra behind the scenes, that's easier said than done when you're talking about Pro Bowl. I mean, Tyron Smith, Zach Martin, I mean, those are guys that there's a good chance they'll be in the Cowboys Ring of Honor, probably in the Hall of Fame too, if things continue to go in the right direction. You don't just lose those guys and then grab some guy that was a 3rd, 4th round pick. And so those 3 guys are out there. They should be in really good shape on offense.
Yeah, I'm with you, John. I think Zach Martin's going to the Hall of Fame, the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So you just don't say next man up when you lose a player like that. But the extension, you mentioned the running game. Simple question, and it's difficult, but you're there every day. Is Ezekiel Elliott the same guy physically? Was it the offensive line or the 300 touches every year, which we know running backs, when the decline starts, it happens quickly. Is he the same guy physically?
I don't think he's the same guy as 2016. 2016, I mean, that's where you saw him leaping over guys, trucking guys, just, I mean, very, very explosive. Now, I will say, though, this offseason, though, he has looked more explosive than he has maybe the last couple. And he's really gone out of his way. He's got he's working out with a private running back coach on the side. And they've posted some of these videos on social media, and he looks quick, and he has looked quick in the things that we've seen. And so I think it's a combination. But the thing I would say is, even without that offensive line healthy, you just didn't see you haven't seen in the last couple of years the same explosive runs. Like once you get to the second level, turning that 15-yard into a 30-yard, or even the home run into a 50-yard touchdown, screen passes, things like that you saw the first couple of years just haven't been there. This is a big year for Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, he has a lot to prove. Where he's at, not just with the offensive line, but just him as a player. Obviously, he's a significant investment for this team. And so he has to be a big part of it, because for this team to meet, the expectations and reach its full potential, they still have to have that running game be successful like it was in 2016 and 2017, 2018. I mean, winning 2 rushing titles in his first 3 seasons set the bar pretty high, and that's why you get a contract like that. So yeah, the expectations need to be higher for Ezekiel. He has to have a big year, even with how good they are, or should be as good as they are as a passing offense. But it's hard to sit there and just go, Zeke's not as explosive, it's ready to move on, when you don't have Lyle Collins on one side, you don't have Tyron Smith, and then Zach Martin's out for 6 games.
All right, let me go to one other weapon question here. We know Amari Cooper is the type of receiver he is. Hopefully he's ready for the start of the season for you guys. I'm reading things. Might not be ready for the start of camp. We'll have to see how that plays out. Michael Gallup, it seems like he always puts up numbers and makes a significant amount of plays. And yes, the Eagle fans wanted the Eagles to take CeeDee Lamb when the Cowboys jump up and took him last year. But all that being said, how much did the Cowboys miss Cole Beasley last year?
They probably missed him a little bit, just from a perspective of, again, like, it's just better to have a veteran when you're going into a season like that, where it's going to be not the same. You got a new coaching staff, and then you just don't have the same offseason that you would have in a typical year. And so, yeah, they probably missed him a little bit, but it's hard to argue with CeeDee Lamb. I mean, I mean, I don't think he's even scratched the surface of what he can be, because there really is not a weakness in his game. I mean, everybody's seen him with the Cowboys last year play in the slot because they have Amari Cooper and because they have Gallup, and those guys fit better on the outside. But I mean, the stuff that we've seen in practice last year, and then again, you're seeing it in these OTAs and minicamp, like, this is a guy that can go up and like high point the ball. It's just, there's not a lot of opportunities there weren't at least last year to do that. Obviously, only having Dak for 5 games doesn't help things. And really, the other part about CeeDee Lamb that I'm interested to see is, I just want to see CeeDee Lamb with like the same quarterback for like multiple years. Because you go back to Oklahoma and it was a different quarterback every year with him. Last year, I mean, he went from Dak to Andy Dalton, Ben DiNucci, Garrett Gilbert. Like, there hasn't been that continuity. And I feel like if you get a full season with him and Dak, I think that he's the guy that'll end up being their leading receiver. He's just special. He's special in a lot of different ways. And the interesting part is that they're continuing to use him as their punt returner, their primary punt returner. And I know a lot of people will look at that as like, man, I don't know, I'd kind of try and protect that guy. But Mike McCarthy said that, when he took over the job, he told John Fossil, special teams is going to be huge, and we're going to put a lot of investment in that. And it certainly looks that way, because I mean, I think CeeDee Lamb has a chance to be their best offensive playmaker. And so they're going to continue to use him on punt returns as well. I mean, if he can stay healthy, he's going to have a big year. It's inevitable. He's just too talented not to.
All right, John, last one from me. Want to thank you for joining the program. Read John at The Athletic. Does a great job covering the Cowboys. Probably nitpicking because they have so much talent on offense, but they just went through this with Dak. Did they do enough at backup quarterback? And then secondly, tight end. Is that are they good enough at tight end? Is that the obvious weakness on this offense?
Yeah, it probably is on the offense, but I think that they'll be fine. I mean, the thing is with Blake Jarr, when he gets hurt in their first game, and he is their big play receiving tight end, he gets hurt in week 1 in the first half of the first game, tears his ACL, and it's one of those where he breaks on a route and just falls down. Nobody even touches him. You knew it was bad right off the beginning. And so with the way the Cowboys operate in terms of the injuries, anybody who had an ACL type injury like that, they do not work them out in the OTAs and minicamp. They work off to the side with the athletic trainers and things like that. But he's on go. He said that he's going to be a full go at the start of training camp. He'll step right back in the starting lineup. But really, one of the bright spots from last year was that Dalton Schultz really emerged to take on a big role. He had a career year all across the board, and he'll be their number 2 tight end. But he's shown that, he made enough leaps and bounds last year that, they can go 2 tight end sets now with both of them and be in pretty good shape. So if both those guys are healthy, they'll be fine at tight end. But backup quarterback, yeah, I don't think they're set there. They've kicked the tires, brought guys in, haven't signed any of them. But as of right now, Garrett Gilbert's the backup. But I'll believe that when I see it week 1 that he's still their backup. I think they're going to continue kicking the tires, whether it be trading a late round pick for somebody or looking at rosters when they start getting trimmed down. There's a chance that Garrett Gilbert's their backup, but like I said, I'll believe it when I see it. I think that's one of the positions that they're continuing to look at. There's not a lot out there right now, but that's a position I don't think they're done at as backup quarterback.
But just tell me Ben DiNucci's going to be somewhere on that roster. Hey, the Eagles only won 4 games last year, and I'll hand one of them directly to Ben DiNucci for handing a victory to the Eagles. But that's just me. I'm a jerk. I can go down that road. All right, last thing. There was conversation here in town about the Eagles being involved in the Julio Jones conversation. Why? Because Howie Roseman gets involved in every trade conversation. He likes the deal. He likes to be in the mix on important things. A lot of that can be said about the Cowboys owner as well. Jerry Jones likes to be involved in everything because he's Jerry Jones. But we just talked about the Cowboys outside prospects, as good as anybody in the league, 1, 2, 3 punch. Did anybody believe when, the Cowboys could get involved in the Julio Jones talk? Did anybody ever believe that could even begin to happen in Dallas?
I feel like the only reason there wasn't serious thought behind that is just because of the fact of having drafted CeeDee Lamb last year. But let's say, because CeeDee Lamb, that was not the goal. I mean, they talked about, they did multiple mock drafts and things like that, and they never had CeeDee Lamb falling to him. That was kind of a, wow, I can't believe this guy's here. We have to take him. So let's pretend that CeeDee Lamb wasn't their draft pick last year. Then yes, they would have been in on Julio Jones this year. But it's almost like having Amari Cooper that you paid, made one of the highest paid players in the league. Michael Gallup is in the final year of his rookie deal, and he continues to get better. I think he's going to have a big year, and obviously a lot of motivation being in that contract year. And then just the fact that like they believe that CeeDee Lamb can line up on the outside, inside, do everything that's asked of him. And they believe that his ceiling's super high. That's the only reason, but I completely agree with you. 9 times out of 10, or probably 9.9 times out of 10, the Cowboys always are kicking the tires on any of that stuff like that. Believe me, we dealt with it down here for several years with Earl Thomas. It was like you felt like Earl Thomas was on the team for how much you were writing and talking about.
He never actually did become a Cowboy, did he?
No,
never did. And I think it got to a point where, you can deal with stuff off the field and behind the scenes in the locker room when that player's in that elite of elite level. But when that starts dropping off a little bit, you might not want to bring as much of that into the locker room. And I think that's where they eventually got to there. I still feel like they would have eventually ended up signing him a year ago if Jason Garrett was the head coach for another year. But I think Mike McCarthy was ready to go in another direction. And I don't think he had much interest in that. But, man, that was a big storyline down here for far too long.
Well, we are glad we went in the Jon Machota direction today. John, we will tap into you from time to time, specifically when the Eagles are going to play the Cowboys in the upcoming weeks during the season. We appreciate you joining us today. Gave us good insight. We will ask you to do so again down the road. Thanks.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Jon Machota, if you're an Athletic subscriber, he does a great job covering the Cowboys. If you don't, you probably should, because, we got great Eagle guys who cover the hometown team for the Athletic as well. Maybe one of which will punch up next week. You never know. All right, we're coming back. We're going to put a bow on the show. Final 10 minutes, final day of the week right here on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.